thoughts on depression and the way we look at depression, because there are several ways of looking at depression, and that's what I'm going to try to do. So it's already in the title, in fact, because I called it Management of Positive and Negative Affect Impact on Functional Recovery. If I say positive and negative affect, if I would say what is depression, we're all going to say immediately it's depressed mood, it's emptiness, depression, being sad, being irritable, being anxious. That's going to be the mood aspects of depression. But if you remember, the second criterion for depression is lack of positive affect, and only lack of interest and lack of pleasure. And that's something we don't talk about. I'm going to talk a lot about that. And from positive and negative affect, we're going to move then to the functional recovery. And you know, maybe Belgium is a small country. I'm from Belgium. It's a small country. We're famous for a few things. We are famous for cartoons. We have a lot of cartoons. And you see here, if I say functioning, well, that's the occupational functioning with Play with the Smurfs, the social functioning with Morris, and the family functioning with Van der Steen. If we talk about depression and the pharmacological treatment of depression, then it's sometimes interesting to say, where are we now with depression? Where are we now with the available antidepressants? And do we still need new ones? Could say we have so many, maybe we have enough. Do we really need new antidepressants? And my firm belief is we do need new antidepressants, because what we can reach with the available ones is in fact still limited. This is the largest meta-analysis on looking at trials with antidepressants versus placebo, controlled trials. And you see here, they were looking at George Papakostas from the US, and they were looking at what is the response rates after 6 to 8 weeks of treatment with an active antidepressant, the blue bar, and with placebo, the green bar. 6 to 8 weeks of treatment. What do you see? Well, we get there, and the response is not yet enough, but let's say there's a significant improvement, clinically significant improvement, 50% reduction of the severity after 6 to 8 weeks, in about 54% of patients with an antidepressant, and it's about 37% in placebo. Up to you to say, is this good or is this bad? I'm going to give you two readings of these figures. You could say, well, it's only 16% better. Only 16% better. That's not that much. Or I could say, the chance that you are a responder is 50% higher. Half of 37, and you add it, and you come to that. If I say that, I say twice the truth, but it sounds very different. First, the interpretation is rather poor. The second is already much better. A 50% higher chance of being a responder with an antidepressant. But what is more embarrassing, if you look at, and that's what George Papakostas did, looking at trials, antidepressants developed in the 80s, in the 90s, and after 2000. What do you see? Overall, antidepressant efficacy doesn't improve. But what does improve is placebo response. Placebo response goes up dramatically. If this trend goes on, you could predict that by the year 2040, that placebo is going to be stronger than antidepressants, which is of course not true. It has a lot to do with the methodology of trials. And there is very, for those among you participating sometimes in randomized clinical trials, if you were already doing these trials in the 80s, okay, you had to fill out a few questionnaires. But if you do it now, you spend more than an hour with the patient because there's so much administration and there's so many questionnaires to fill out, etc. This is contact time. And this influences dramatically placebo response. Mark Zimmerman's group, they have been showing, for example, in a very elegant paper, that if you see a patient every week, or you see a patient every week with 1 skip, and every week and 2 skips, that you see a dramatic difference in the outcome. So depression is, of course, something that has to do with biology, and you can treat it in a biological way with antidepressants. But it has a lot to do with other things. And the doctor-patient relationship is also very important, and that's what we call placebo. In the pharmaceutical industry, they don't like placebo because they say, it's embarrassing because if this is the case, that means that if you do 3 trials by chance, by statistical chance, 1 in the 3 will fail, will be negative. If you have 100% on a drug and 0 on placebo, you just do 1 trial and you're sure you're going to have a difference. But if you have 54 versus 37, you do 3-4 trials, at last 1 should be negative. So that costs a lot of money. I'm a clinician, and I like placebo, because placebo says something about doctor-patient relationship, about caring about the others, about that the patients have confidence in you, etc. Moreover, there's a lot of criticism and on the efficacy of antidepressants, and it's sometimes said, well, you know, and you have to know that this is what I showed you on the previous slide, this is for the published studies. But as you know, there's also sometimes unpublished studies. Not everything is published. And this is looking at Moreno's paper, showing that there's a publication bias. A publication bias, and this is shown here with the funnel plot. For those of you less familiar with it, I'm going to simplify it. But these here are all the trials that were submitted to the FDA. And I say I'm going to simplify it, but what you see here is this distribution is like a triangle, is symmetrical. In fact, on the x-axis, what you have, and I'm simplifying, is looking at the effect size, and on the y-axis is in fact how large is your trial. So if you have small trials, like this one here, it's normal that you are unlucky here, and you have a small effect, and once you're lucky, then you have a larger effect. But the larger the trial is, the closer it should be to the mean effect. I'm simplifying, but it's about like that. So all these studies for 12 antidepressants submitted to the FDA for approval, and you see, okay, it's symmetrical. That means all the studies are there. If you look at those that are published, 18 out of the 72 have not been published, and this is at the data here. What do you see? It's no longer symmetrical. You see that you're missing quite a lot of points here in the lower left. And that's the proof that there's a publication bias. This is what they call the funnel plot. Is the funnel plot symmetrical, or has it been eaten to the left? So that happens. And when you see this, usually then it's pointed in the direction of the pharmaceutical industry, saying, oh, they are hiding data. Or they are talking to the opinion leaders who work too close with the pharmaceutical industry, and they say, oh, they play the same game and they hide data. And that could be true in the past, could have been true in the past. It's no longer true because now there's a firm commitment of everyone for at least having all the data on the internet. But if you have, for those doing research and trying to publish papers, if you have a negative finding, whatever, drugs or in another field, you have a negative finding and you want to publish it, it's very difficult to get it accepted. It's very human. You want to prove, although from a scientific point, a negative finding is as important as a positive finding, but we want a positive finding. The positive is going to be published, and the negative, there's going to be skepticism, is there not a failure, is there not a methodological problem, and it's going to be much more difficult to get it published. That's also a reason for that. And that's often said, and that's often taken into account by people who are against antidepressants and who say everything should be psychotherapy. But in the field of psychotherapy, it's exactly the same. This is Pim Kuipers from the Netherlands, and this is here looking at all psychotherapy trials for depression. You see here, I took the red arrow, there's points missing here because this is not symmetrical. Just looking at those with cognitive behavior therapy, there is quite a lot of points missing here. And that's again the proof that even psychotherapy, where there's no financial interest, but it's exactly the same. Negative, smaller studies with negative data go more frequently unpublished. What about agomelatine? I say the times are changing, and there's more, one is more rigorous in trying to publish and getting the data available, etc. And this is a very interesting paper published by Taylor earlier this year in British Medical Journal. And this is look here, these are all the effect sizes for the unpublished studies and for the published studies. And this is here the meta-analysis for the unpublished and for the published, and you see no difference at all. So with agomelatine, not all studies are published, but there is no difference in effect sizes for the published and the unpublished.